what's the general perception of Harry and Meghan in the town from the people you spoke to?
If we're talking exclusively about Netflix, I think there's an exhaustion with the two of them, especially as they need a lot of hand-holding. There's a lot of FaceTime. There's a lot of feedback. I think that the ultimate verdict there is that they're a bit tiresome and that the yield, what this partnership has produced, has not quite been meaningful.
And I suppose that's the key point, isn't it? If the yield is there, people, I imagine, will forgive anything. The message clearly seems to be they have failed when it comes to making a huge amount of money. Aha! Welcome, Royalists. You are very welcome to the Royalist podcast with me, your host, Tom Sykes. And we have a fabulous episode again for you this week with all of our favourite segments: the Royal Roast, Tea with Tom, Fashion with Plum, and the news that broke earlier today that King Charles III is undertaking his riskiest diplomatic manoeuvre yet, a sensational interview with Matt Donnelly, the star variety reporter who exposed the collapse of Meghan and Harry's relationship with Netflix, a sensational revelation about Polo 2 that Matt Donnelly has for us. So really, this is going to be our third episode of The Royalist, and we're hoping it's going to be just as brilliant as the first two. For those of you who don't know me, hello, I'm Tom Sykes, and this is the Royalist podcast, your weekly destination for royal scoops and scandal. It's been another amazing week of royal news, and there was a fabulous serialization of historian Hugo Vickers's new book on the late Queen called A Personal History, which revealed that she bitingly suggested when Harry left the royal family that he had gone to become a carer for Archie. Also revealed that Prince Philip died of pancreatic cancer and suffered with it for 8 years before his death. Well, I'm thrilled to say that we've booked Hugo Vickers for an upcoming show yet to be confirmed, but here is what is coming up on today's show. So let's get into the royal rundown. First, royal fashion with Plum Sykes. Well, it was announced yesterday that we won't get to see the York princesses in their finery this weekend, as they have been banned from attending Easter Sunday with the king. But it's fair to say that they have attracted scathing reviews over the years for their fashion misses. Well, Plum Sykes, the Vogue contributing editor, and it just happens to be my sister, reports on how they got back on track and the jaw-dropping price tags attached to their new favourite designer. Wonder where all the money came from, Jeffrey? Then, Tea with Tom. Paula Froelich joins me to spill all the tea on this week's breaking news that King Charles III is indeed going to undertake a long-rumoured trip to America to suck up to Donald Trump. Is this wise? And lastly, we're going to get into our Royal Roast. This week's specially extended Royal Roast features an interview with Variety's chief reporter, Matt Donnelly, whose remarkable coverage of Meghan and Harry's relationship with Netflix has redefined our understanding of the couple's commercial prospects. And he has an amazing scoop about Polo 2, as we are calling it. So stay tuned for that one. And one last thing, please don't forget to stay to the very end for my royal joke of the week. It's a trick to make you keep watching and listening all the way to the end, but I promise you it's worth it. So first up, we've got our royal fashion with Plum Sykes. Plum Sykes. Hi, Plum. How are you? And more importantly, where are you?
Tommy, I'm reporting live from Paris, where there are no royals at all.
But there is lots of fashion.
There's lots of fashion, and I've obviously got my French scarf on just to get in the groove. And I'm in the office of the house I'm staying in, which is like this incredible conservatory, and all these vines are kind of growing up, and I can't believe they get to sit here and work and look at a courtyard. It's incredible. It's so nice.
That is très chic, is all I'm going to say. Vines inside the office.
I know. It's too much, isn't it? It's too delicious.
I'm loving
but I have to say, I was pretty shocked, Tom, at the news that we won't be seeing not only Eugenie and Beatrice on Easter Sunday, but their outfits, because obviously that's what I'm interested in. So I was hoping that we were going to crescendo up to Easter Sunday, but it looks like the clothes will be left in the back of the wardrobe for them.
It's a sad day. It's a sad day for lovers of extraordinary fashion because, of
Yeah.
course, what most of us think about when we think about the York Princesses fashion is, I believe, Peter York, the author of the Sloane Ranger's Diary, might call frumpy. Would that be an appropriate word?
Yes. So I've been observing something quite interesting about these two girls. So, Tom, I was at a party in the Cotswolds a couple of weeks ago. I think we mentioned this.
We might
It
have.
was very glamorous. It was a very cool. It was what I call the county jet set, country jet set. Gabby Peacock, Sophie Stanbury, the McAlpines, the Bamfords, the Simmons, the Mortimers, all these people. Who walks in but Beatrice and Eugenie? Looking fabulous. Looking fabulous, right? Really, really skinny, dressed in black. Their skin was glowing. Their hair was shiny. They looked like they'd walked out of like a Bergdorf's hair salon. And everyone was like, how are you? How are you? And it was just after the latest kind of Andrew revelations. And if I'd been them, there is no way I would have been going out to a big party in the Cotswolds. Absolutely no way. I would have been commiserating by the Arga at home in a pair of cashmere socks, let's face it. But in they came and everyone kept saying, how are you? And they kept going, we're great. We're great. And I just sort of thought to myself, what are they saying? A, by being at this party, and B, by looking so good suddenly. Because it always felt to me, Tom, as though, unlike the rest of the royals, they didn't really know what they wanted to say through their clothes. So as we're saying, when you go back to them being teenagers, when they were at Trooping of the Colour in 2008, for example, there's a really entertaining picture of them actually in the royal carriage with these hats that are just like something out of, Cinderella, basically. It's like gigantic roses and gigantic feathers and everything. And we just thought, what on earth? And the clothes almost looked like kind of high street. So it was like the ascot hat with the Zara coat, a bit like Kate Middleton would have done, but she always managed to pull it off more chicly because the royals, remember, haven't been fans of French or Italian designer clothes. That's not their thing to wear those expensive clothes. They don't wear expensive American designers. It's just not considered the done thing. But suddenly, Tom, in the last couple of years, these girls are looking chicer than the Olsen twins. In fact, they're dressing like the Olsen twins, which, as you know, is probably one of the trendiest looks in the world.
And the Olsen twins actually have a label, don't they, that they've been wearing a bit. What's it called?
They do. So the Olsen twins label is the Row. And I cannot believe, Tom, that you had to ask me what their label's called, because everyone in the universe, even incompetent non-fashion journalists such as yourself, have heard of the Row. But
That's what you're
the
here
Olsen-
for, sis.
That's what I'm here for. But the Olsen twins, were these two young actresses, and they used to dress up. They're tiny and they're very, very skinny. They always dressed in great big coats, and they smothered themselves in them. It made them look very vulnerable and cool. Great big Kelly bags. And it became an aesthetic, this Olsen's aesthetic. Now suddenly, Beatrice and Eugenie are going out wearing great big expensive coats. They're wrapped up. They're looking chic. Their hair's plain and simple. It's not all curly. And Tom, the bags. Celine bags have been spotted. That's a big deal. It's a big deal.
Now, can we just talk about the Olsen twins, the Rose stuff? Because I know
Yeah.
you say to me it's expensive. What does that mean in layman's language? I mean, how much would you be spending? How much would they be spending on these outfits?
A coat costs what someone might spend on a small second-hand car.
Ooh.
Like probably $6,000 or $7,000 for a coat. Now, in England, obviously, you can buy a second-hand car for that. I'm not sure if you can buy a second-hand car in the States right now for $6,000 or $7,000 because of their inflationary pressures. But, and a handbag, these handbags we're talking about, I mean, one of them was also, I think, hang on, I'm just going to look at my photos. It was,
Yeah, well, I mean, and people can let us know in the comments below how much your first second-hand car cost and whether it cost more than one of Beatrice and Eugenie's coats.
So in December 2025, we've got a picture of Beatrice walking along. She's wearing this really, really chic navy coat. It's got beautiful brass buttons. She's got a red skirt underneath. She's got one crossbody bag draped across her, which looks like it could be a Chanel or something like that with a chain. And then she's got a huge Goyard tote. And Goyard is one of the oldest French luggage manufacturers. And the big thing is it's got this little pattern that's sort of like a diamond shape. It's highly recognizable. They've got a shop on Mount Street in London and, on the right bank in Paris. And you get the bags monogrammed with your initials. So that's the thing. These bags are thousands and thousands of dollars if you can get your hands on one. If you can get your hands on one, Tom.
So would your overall thesis be concerning Beatrice and Eugenie that they once upon a time weren't terribly good dressers, but now seem to have figured out what their style is and how to look better or how to look good or how to look fantastic?
Yes. Well, what I think is that the influences on them when they were younger, and you can see this very clearly. If you look at pictures of Diana and Fergie, who were best friends for a while, right, who were always together, they dressed initially in a very garish 80s way. And I know lots and lots of people will say, all your viewers are going to disagree with me. They'll say, Diana was a fashion icon. Actually, in the 80s, she wasn't a fashion icon. Us in the fashion world thought that she was a terribly frumpy Sloane, as was Fergie. And they dressed in this very garish kind of 80s way. Then you look at the daughters, and the daughters dressed like frumpy Sloane Rangers. Lots of patterns, lots of flowers, lots of incredibly unflattering sort of English summer dresses with great big hats that didn't work. Nothing slick. And it's almost because among the English upper classes, it's considered bourgeois or nouveau riche to look too good. Do you know what I mean? So it's almost like part of being royal was looking frumpy.
Yes.
That was the point. So the girls obviously would have grown up being like that. And actually, Zara Phillips was a bit like that too, Princess Anne's daughter. But I personally think my thesis, Tom, is that these two girls have, partly because of the husbands who are quite sophisticated and quite like the Italian husband's quite Euro jet set. Isn't that true?
Yes. Edo Mapelli Mozzi.
You can't be among the Italian aristocracy and wear pink flowery dresses and think that anyone's going to let you into lunch. It's not going to work. So I think that their style has kind of evolved. They've also been hanging out much more with the Cotswolds jet set, right? Now, the Cotswolds jet set are not the country turnips of Sandringham or Balmoral. The Cotswold jet set are the jet set of New York, Paris, and London. So they all dress for the town when they're in the country. So these girls, again, when you see pictures of them out in the Cotswolds, their clothes are becoming more like their friends. So Beatrice is dressing in beautiful black dresses that look remarkably similar to her friend Gabby Peacock's black dresses. So do you know who Gabby Peacock is? Should we explain, Tom?
You're going to have to explain, yes, for those of us who are not
Yes.
members of the Cotswold Jet Set, please.
Yes,
And
so-
I would like to point out that my sister, Plum Sykes, is the author of a fantastic book called Wives Like Us, which, if you want to know about the Cotswold Jet Set, is kind of the set text of the Cotswold Jet Set.
Thank you, Tom. So among the Cotswold jet set, you've got Gabriella Peacock, who is a nutritionist. She's an ex-model. Her little black book is out of control. She's very chic. She always looks incredible. Then newcomer, recent incomer, Lauren Cowell. So guess who last year hosted a charity clay pigeon shoot, of which she raised something like £1 million in about 5 minutes flat, which is unheard of in England because people are so stingy here when it comes to charity. Lauren Cowell. Guess who's at and she's married to Simon Cowell, by the way, in case people don't know. Guess who's at the charity shoot lunch? Eugenie, Beatrice, Mrs. McAlpine, Mrs. Bamford, the Cotswolds jet set. And this time they're all dressed in tweed, made by Purdy, made by Holland and Holland. and they all kind of wearing the same outfits. So there's kind of one place you get your tweed, or you get it from Holland Cooper. But again, the girls are fitting in now more. They're not looking like the frumpy Sloanes anymore.
I love what you say about how the royals and in the upper classes generally sort of prided themselves on looking frumpy and unfashionable, and it reminded me of something that Deborah Mitford said, and she said that someone said to her, "Oh, where do you get your clothes?" She said, "Oh, I buy them all at agricultural shows."
Exactly, which is exactly where those people do buy their clothes, because they would never go to Bond Street. They would never go to a designer. One, because they don't have the money. Two, the other thing is, if you're old school, upper crust, aristocratic, the last thing you ever want to be seen wearing is a label or a logo of any description.
Or indeed something new.
Or indeed something new. And actually, I've got a neighbour who I recently said to him, "Gosh, I love your sweater." And he said, "Had it since I was at school." And he was about 80. And it was kind of moth-holed and old, but beautiful. And they don't feel like they need to show off through their clothes in the way that kind of the new rich need to. They are, their style's eternal. What they have is eternal. But it's interesting because I think that Beatrice and Eugenie are moving away from that royal aesthetic, which is to look, non-branded, let's say, and they're going a bit more branded. And you have to ask yourself, where is that taking them?
Yes, no, it's very funny what you're saying, Plum, about the old clothes versus the new clothes. Because I remember when I was at school, one of the you had to have two tail suits. A
So I'm sorry,
new
I'm
one.
gonna I've got to stop you there because you've got to explain what "when I was at school" means
Well,
in English. Or do you want me to explain if
I
you say
I
that?
briefly was a student at Eton College, but I didn't get on terribly well, so I had to go elsewhere. Yes, when I was a student at Eton College, and I apologise profusely to my parents and grandparents and other people who paid the bills very kindly for me, that I so ungraciously misbehaved that I was expelled. When I was at school, you had to have two suits. So you had to have a new suit to wear to church on a Sunday, and or open days like the 4th of June and things like that. And then you had an old suit, a second hand. You were allowed your second suit could be a second hand suit. But of course, the really old money kids prided themselves on having about 6 really old moth-ridden suits that had all come out of the attic that belonged to, grandpa or great uncle Jim or what have you. But the height of suspicion was reserved, I remember, for poor James Archer, who was Geoffrey Archer's son. And somebody said, yes, well, someone said to us, well, do you know what? He's got 2 new suits. It's very, very bad form.
Yeah, two new suits at Eton. Sad. Sad.
Terrible.
Two new suits in the Cotswolds. Great. Right up their street.
Well, it's extraordinary, isn't it, though? Because they are, they have obviously had an incredibly difficult time, these 2 girls. Whether you are in the party that says, they should have known what they were doing, they were old enough to know what they were doing, or you're in the party that says, they were benighted with, terribly they were allotted very unfortunate parents in the parent allotment games. Um, they have had an extremely difficult time. There's been all these rumors about their marriages, their relationships, and now we're seeing they're being excluded from sort of royal gatherings like Easter. So at least they're looking stylish amongst their mates, and maybe they can leave the whole fusty royal world behind and become members of the Cotswold Jetset elite, Plum.
Yeah, looking great with it. I mean, I have to say, as a mother myself, and not knowing very much about the ins and outs of their particular lives or their particular doings, I feel it's a little cruel to exclude them from family occasions based on what their father did, because I don't think that it's fair that the sins of the father should be visited on these two girls, really. That's my real feeling. But thank God they're looking great.
Plum, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you as always. Thank you so much. And don't forget, if you want to keep up with the Cotswold jet set, the only place really to do it is Plum Substack, which is called PS by Plum Sykes. And you can see a little QR code there on your screen. And as I say, if you really want to get the deep dive into the Cotswold jet set, Wives Like Us is Plum's fantastic book that was it published last year?
Paperback last year, hardback the year before. Yeah, it's around. You can get it. Yeah, it's good. It's fun.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much for coming, Plum. See you next time.
Bye, Tommy. Bye, Tommy. Love you. Bye.
And now we're going to get into Tea with Tom. And I'm here with my old pal, the acerbic NewsNation commentator, Paula Froelich. Paula, it was announced today that King Charles III is to make this state visit to the United States. Some people saying that it risks not just normalizing, but rewarding Donald Trump's sort of relentless trashing of the United Kingdom, saying how useless they are. Their aircraft carriers are mere toys compared to that we don't need the UK anyway. Do you think that it's a good move for Keir Starmer to send King Charles to America at this exact moment in the world history?
I think that's precisely why King Charles is going, despite the fact that 2 members of parliament have come out and said absolutely not, he should not go while the Iran war is on. I think because Donald Trump has no love for Keir Starmer, but he does love the king, and that is exactly the king's role, is to be a diplomat and to smooth things over and to promote British interests with Donald Trump. So I understand exactly why he's going, and I applaud it, frankly.
I think that's a really interesting point, and it certainly is exactly the king's job. I mean, this literally is his job to go and, improve diplomatic relations. I think it's slightly unfair of Keir Starmer, though. I mean, because they did do this massive state visit to the United Kingdom last year. We got absolutely the square root of nothing back from it at all, other than more insults and more abuse from Donald Trump. And I understand for Keir Starmer, it's no no dice, is it? If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Nothing's worse than it was before. But for King Charles, this is a terrific gamble. And while it's important to note that the king basically has to do what he's told to do by the government officially, there is certainly the potential for the private secretaries to push back and say they don't think this is right or what have you. And it seems to me like for Donald Trump, for King Charles, for Keir Starmer, it's no risk at all. But for King Charles, frankly, you won't read this in the UK papers, but his reign has not gone well, to put things mildly. He's now going to be there aligned with, the world's most divisive politician. I mean,
Well, it's that, but it's also here's the other big problem, Tom. King Charles is kind of the appetizer for the main event in July when William and Catherine are coming. So this entire visit is to celebrate 250 years of America. Of course, the official date is in July, July 4th, when William and Catherine are coming. So King Charles is just there to kind of butter him up, but also the timing is a little odd. You know, Harry and Meghan will have just come back from their bizarre business quasi-royal tour to Australia. And then, of course, King Charles is coming. And I don't think he will see the grandchildren while he's there. And Trump really loathes Harry and Meghan. He has made no bones about how he thinks they are disloyal and awful. So King Charles is going to have to put up with a little bit of that as well. Lots of American speculation, lots of arrows over the bow to kind of from Harry and Meghan's side, because that'll happen as well. And then he's just going to have to soldier on through. And frankly, he's not in the best of health. So I say good luck to him. And after the US, he's going to Bermuda. So this is not a short rando little trip, hop across the pond. This is an official OMG tour. And, he's going to need a lot of strength and a lot of stomach.
yes, indeed. Paula, in your role as a news anchor at NewsNation, what is your professional opinion of what level of excitement or interest there'll be in King Charles coming to America? Is it Is it just a sort of dusty old waxwork showing up and shaking some hands? Or will it be a televisual moment that people get invested in?
Oh, I think people are invested, if only because it's yet another chapter in the soap opera that the Americans are obsessed with, the days of our Montecito lives. We literally can't get enough. I mean, it's everyone is obsessed. The royal family has turned into the most amazing soap opera ever, which is why people are so obsessed. It's not because they're so amazing and alluring and all this. It is the ultimate family drama playing out across two continents. And again, as I've said, Harry and Meghan cannot sit quietly on their hands while daddy or their brother does something that takes the attention away from themselves. So they will definitely be doing something. In my opinion, they will likely take Archie and Lily to maybe see the Space Museum or the Smithsonian. Just happens to be nearby, but poor old daddy won't see them. That's a gamble in the dark, but it will be something like that.
So Paula sent me some very excited text messages quite late last night. I'm reading Tom Bower book. It's fantastic. And then I say, and then William is like a saint. And I say, why is William a saint? I haven't actually read it yet, because I haven't, although I did interview Tom last week. Uh, Paula replies, putting up with crazy ass Harry and Meghan. So tell me, because isn't that awful to admit, but I'm afraid I didn't read the whole book before I interviewed Tom, because it wasn't out. Um, so tell us all about it. I'm really, really intrigued to hear some detailed review of the book from somebody that I trust.
Okay. First of all, it arrived, I want to say around 12:35 yesterday. And I immediately went upstairs, broke it open, told my dog he'd have to hold it, and that mother wasn't taking him out for walks just this moment. It was really fascinating. Now, there is some new reporting. A lot of it is amalgam of things, but he does a very good timeline of just showing exactly how Meghan and Harry's truths don't add up with the actual truth. And he also does a very good timeline of this is what she said then, and how it's all different and how it all is malleable depending on the right cause, the right time, the numbers in the polls. And the same goes for Harry. Harry is just portrayed as this insanely selfish, self absorbed narcissist who, under the wing of Meghan, is never wrong and lobs furious, like balls of fire at first William and then Kate personally. And it's just, it's amazing. Although they have this beautiful life in Montecito, it's blah, blah, blah. They are just daily obsessed with the workings of Catherine and William and also King Charles and how King Charles for once in his life, isn't bending to Harry's will, and he can't understand it.
Fascinating. I was
Mm.
speaking to my friend Georgie Campbell, on Lady Colin Campbell on the phone yesterday or the day before, and she said to me, of course, Tom Bower's style is that he assembles all his facts, thousands of them, and then fires them off like a machine gun.
Mm. And he also does what a lot of people in the media don't do. They will report the day of news, but they will forget to report everything that happened before that is directly related to this one event, this one quote. So it was really great composition, if you will. And I am excited to see what Harry and Meghan come up with for not just King Charles's visit, his first state dinner, by the way. Yes, he's been to the US 19 times. He's never had a state dinner in his own honor. And of course, Harry and Meghan are going to want some attention. But also, what happens in July when William is here and Harry goes over to England for Birmingham and to meet up with the Invictus Games people a year before the actual Invictus Games.
Interesting. Yeah, I actually took your advice. You were saying the other day that somebody should call up some Birmingham City Council members. So I did call some up And I spoke to a very nice chap called Fred Goodgrind, I think his name was, who's a counsellor. And he said that fundamentally, people aren't, remotely interested in the Invictus Games. They don't really have nobody knows it's happening. But he said he's very worried that the radicals who stirred up political feeling around the Tel Aviv Maccabi match may indeed do the same thing when a bunch of
Mhm.
IDF soldiers wounded. And Tom Bower makes this point in the book, which is why I'm talking about it. When a bunch of IDF soldiers show up in Birmingham, which is has a huge and very vibrant Muslim population. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. Paula, one other thing that we have to talk about is poor old Prince Andrew. I have to say, it's funny. I feel sorry for most people when something really awful happens, but I've never really felt sorry for Prince Andrew. But I did finally feel sorry for him the other day when I read that he is so sad now that he has to go and sit. He goes and sits in his mildew-ridden caravan in the garden that we've seen the photos of Marsh Farm, which he is moving into. He's currently at Wood Farm and he's moving into Marsh Farm, and that's where the caravan is. And when he wants to go down to Marsh Farm, he goes and sits in it and he can spend several hours in his mossy caravan contemplating that once, I don't know, he could have fitted 55 of those caravans just into his bedroom at Royal Lodge.
Or at least one teddy per caravan.
Yeah.
I don't feel that bad. I grew up in Ohio and Kentucky. There were plenty of people I know who had a trailer or lived in the trailer full time, and frankly, I think he seems to enjoy it. He likes to go in and play around and have little play. I've said this to you before. It's a little bit like Marie Antoinette at Versailles, creating her own farm and her own little village just so she could play around with the real people. And so for him, I think it's a little playtime, and he probably does bring his teddies, talks to them, and has tea with them. Maybe has an arrest with the London teddy bear that I'm sure was given to him after his arrest. So, yeah, I don't feel bad for him. I think it's nice, and also I think it's luxury compared to a jail cell.
Do you know, amazingly, I don't feel bad for him anymore either now. Isn't that
Mm,
incredible? You've
yeah,
cured me.
thank you.
Thank
It's
God.
it's his little playpen, Tom. He loves it.
Yeah.
It's gonna be great.
Well, Paula, thank you so much for joining us. I'm hoping you're going to stay tuned for our next segment, which I must confess I did actually pre-record. So you might notice a subtle change in the lighting if you're watching on video. But if you're listening on audio on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you won't notice anything. But the next segment coming up, Paula, you are going to love it so much. It's an interview with Matt Donnelly from Variety magazine, who did that incredible story the other day
Mm.
about how the Hollywood has fallen out of love with Meghan and Harry, the trouble with the relationship with Netflix, and he has a sensational revelation about Polo 2, which was put up to try and discredit what he wrote in his book. This thing was suddenly whipped out of the hat about Polo 2. Without further ado, let's get into the Royal Roast, a specially extended Royal Roast with Variety's chief correspondent, Matt Donnelly. Well, folks, since the Royalist podcast launched a few weeks ago, we've had an incredible run of special interviews. We've had Andrew Loney, we've had Tom Bower, and today I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by the incredible Matt Donnelly, chief correspondent of Variety, who published last week's forensic takedown of the House of Sussexes relationship with Netflix. And Matt, in your variety piece, the theme that really jumped out seemed to be how incredibly difficult the Sussexes are to work with. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I think that when you do high flying business in Hollywood with very powerful cultural figures, there's always going to be a getting to know you period, especially when those figures don't come from Hollywood itself. While Meghan spent many years as a network television recurring guest star actress, I think that the level of their ambition when they moved to the States in 2020 and set out to build a media and entertainment empire was quite just that. It was very ambitious. So I think that what we've seen over the past 5.5 years in their partnership with Netflix is a lot of false starts and a lot of gum in the machinery to properly help launch them as mini media moguls, which I think my piece proves has yet to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, the Sussexes, you may be aware that when they lived in the United Kingdom, didn't have the reputation of being the easiest employees, shall we say, to put it diplomatically. But you have an amazing detail in your piece that when Meghan got annoyed in a Zoom meeting, she'd turn her camera off.
Yes, that has been one of the stickiest parts of the story. But multiple sources told me that when Megan would sit, especially in meetings regarding her brand, as ever, her lifestyle and homewares range, that when she heard feedback she didn't like, or heard ideas that she didn't think were appropriate, she would turn her camera off to express her displeasure. It's certainly an interesting
Um,
way to provide feedback in Hollywood.
it's certainly an interesting way to provide feedback, Matt. How do you is the perception around them that they are difficult without really having the, uh, power to be difficult? Mhm.
That's a really interesting question. I think for just for how they live, the protocols by which they live, I think that they have a very similar system to what a senior royal might. You know what I mean? Long security advances, many preceding greetings and other middle managers and underlings that sort of introduce them or hype them or sort of provide a buffer before you actually get to the two principles of the company, which is I think an unusual thing for show business. For all its glamour and all of its intimidation, Hollywood is a working culture. It's a business like any others, and it has its own protocols. You know what I mean? Deals are done over lunch at the Polo Lounge. Filmmaker meetings are done with 100 people inside of a studio. There's not so much decorum, I think, as maybe the Sussexes are used to. And I think that one of the most interesting and really rewarding parts of reporting the story I did that ran last week was seeing how those two worlds collide, or more appropriately, do not.
I mean, incredible details have emerged that they expect people to call them sir and ma'am. I mean, again, astonishing stuff that you turned up, Matt. I mean, would that be just incredibly would it be offensive almost to people?
Well, I haven't read the headlines today, but I still believe we do not live in a constitutional monarchy here in the U.S. So I don't know that "sir" or "ma'am" would be appropriate in an American setting. But I will say, to the shock of some in their defense, that these are protocols they've been used to. At least Harry's been used to his entire life, and that is some of the allure around the two of them, right? Like the idea that
Mhm.
you're in the presence of what amount to foreign dignitaries, if only they were still senior royals, which they're not. But I think that that's sort of like the sexiness around the Sussexes. And even in my piece, when I discussed specifically some of the very big executives who my sources tell me quite adamantly are disenchanted with Meghan and Harry, they still, are on the record claiming to be very good social friends with the pair and running into each other in
Sure.
Montecito. That is its own kind of currency in Hollywood. The idea to say, "Oh, she's my neighbor in Montecito. Of course, things are all fine with us." It's a lot of part of the presentational aspect of doing a job in Hollywood.
Yeah. And we're going to get into that thing that Netflix sort of pushed back
Mhm.
against your story.
Yeah.
But before we do that, I wanted to ask you, what's the general perception of Harry and Meghan in the town from the people you spoke to? Is it that they're very difficult to work for, that they're tiresome, that they're demanding? What's the kind of general perception?
If we're talking exclusively about Netflix, which is what the story dealt with, I think a lot of the
Mm.
people inside that company, which is a massive global streaming content operation that employs almost all creatives in Hollywood, really. At this point in time, almost every major creative in Hollywood has done or does business with Netflix. So I think in terms of the culture inside that company, yeah, I think there's an exhaustion with the two of them, especially as they need a lot of hand holding. There's a lot of FaceTime. There's a lot of feedback. And that's not necessarily typical of most production partners who will have one creative executive assigned to them from Netflix. But then again, Netflix also made an uncommon investment in this pair. Their roughly $60 million overall deal that then included the expansion of Megan's brand, which less than a year later resulted in the divestment from that brand. But yeah, I think that Netflix kind of went all in on Meghan and Harry in a way they have not on most creatives. And with that has come, I think, a lot of visibility and truth into how they operate as creatives and also as administrative people. And I think that the ultimate verdict there is that they're a bit tiresome, and that the yield, what this partnership has produced, has not quite been meaningful.
And I suppose that's the key point, isn't it? I mean, you can be as exhausting, as tiresome, as demanding, as difficult as you want. If the yield is there, people, I imagine, will forgive anything in terms of making a huge amount of money. Why no one would care, right? But
Absolutely.
the message clearly seems to be that they have failed when it comes to making a huge amount of money.
Oh yes, or at least providing a significant return on investment. I mean, that said, the docu series, which was sort of the asset everyone in town wanted, this 6 episode, incredibly inside look at Meghan and Harry's decision to leave the UK and come to Los Angeles, and all of the incredibly juicy and also historic, if you think about it, details therein. That premiered and still rates as Netflix's highest unscripted project ever. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a project that has made as much noise as Meghan and Harry, which is now multiple years old. And I think part of the goal of Meghan and Harry signing a deal like this is to prove that basically their mettle as a couple and as creatives can far outlast their own personal drama. Someone like Gwyneth Paltrow has said for years that her ultimate goal with Goop is that one day it wouldn't be associated with her name, that the name Goop wouldn't instantly conjure images of the Oscar-winning actress we all know and love, that it would be known for, their lotions or creams or peptides or whatever have you. So I think that that's a similar model we can apply here as a litmus test to how they're working in Hollywood and how the larger consumer is receiving them. And I think the overwhelming answer is no, we haven't moved past Meghan and Harry and their personal machinations, and they've yet to produce something that's significantly culturally impactful outside of their own story.
Yeah, it's interesting that because what one friend of Harry's said to me was they said, "Oh, look, everybody's got this all wrong. We're selling so much jam, you wouldn't even believe it. Jam's not even the top seller. We're selling all this wine. Look at George Clooney. He made more money from Casamigos tequila than he ever made from a whole lifetime of acting." I mean, that is true, but the sense seems to be that the brand actually hasn't worked out either, because despite all these claims from their office that they've sold $60 million worth of jam and more than major jam manufacturers. The truth is, it's hard to imagine that Netflix would have split from them if that was the case, isn't it? I mean, just doesn't
No,
seem like
it
logical to
defies
me.
it defies common sense. Netflix is a publicly traded company. So if they've decided to take a huge gamble and invest in an experimental field like consumer goods, as they did with As Ever. First, Ted Sarandos told this to me on the record in a cover story we did with him last March. He said that this model, this business, this venture for them was a huge discovery model for Netflix. And I can tell you personally from sources and from my prior reporting, Netflix paid everything. Netflix paid for the manufacturing, Netflix paid for the shipping, Netflix paid for the branding, Netflix paid for, this is a massive investment. So if they are going from success to record-breaking jam haul to record-breaking jam haul, why then after a year does Netflix ban? Doesn't that doesn't that contradict the responsibility they have for shareholders, which is to provide value? It defies common sense.
Absolutely. And I remember that piece with Ted Sarandos where he said that the As Ever store and Netflix house would be expressions of fandom, I think was the phrase he used to you, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Um, and is that ultimately the problem, that the fandom isn't there, that, people kind of like George Clooney, right? They kind of think he's cool. Like, do we like Meghan? Do we like Harry? What's the perception of Hollywood? Like, do people want to be around them? I mean, is the brand toxic? You don't see them at any parties, you don't see them at any events. Like, why aren't they anywhere? Why aren't they visible?
Exactly. I think one of the more interesting case studies that answers your question is look at what happened on the occasion of Kris Jenner's 70th birthday, which I believe was last year. It also happened to be a very solemn day in the UK. It was Remembrance Day. And we saw, tabloid reports at the time said that Meghan and Harry attended this very high profile, incredibly A-list celebration and were photographed. And the second the photos were published, they ran into a sort of massive PR problem that many in the UK thought it was disrespectful to see the couple, especially the son of the king, out at at a party in Bel Air with a 007 theme, enjoying himself on a very solemn day for his countrymen. Um, the narrative from the Sussexes at the time was that they never signed an NDA to release, their images that were photographs from the party. But later, we saw just a few months ago, Kim Kardashian spoke out and said that actually they did sign releases for their photos to be published, and they ran into, as they stubbed their toe PR wise and ran into some bad optics. And instead of taking responsibility and apologizing, they tried to shift blame. So I think to me, that's a microcosm of what it's like for established show business people who probably want to be welcoming to the son of a beloved figure like Diana, to someone who does so much for mental health, to someone who is a big supporter and founder, I believe, of the Invictus games. But these are the kind of situations you find yourself in. You know what I mean? That even extending a simple social invite turns into a 5-car PR pileup. So I think that to me is quite demonstrative of what it's like to even do the most minimal, like the lowest bar possible socializing with these two. So imagine what it's like to be in business with them.
That Kris Jenner thing was absolutely the most horrendous bit of PR. I'm told that it contributed to their PR, their head of PR quitting, Meredith
Mm,
Maines.
mhm.
Um, Basically, they told the Sussex site told us, they told journalists that they'd been sent a form which they had been able to tick, saying that they didn't want their photos put on social media. And I checked with Jenner's PR when they said this, and they just said, no, it's complete rubbish. It's not true. I mean, it was like, why would you, if you're going to start a fight with anyone on social media? I mean, the Jenner Kardashian, wow, what a fight to pick.
But doesn't that sort of perfectly illustrate how even just the most common interactions with these two can become the most bungled, unnecessarily complicated, and reality distorting endeavor? I mean, that to me was just an amazing piece of pop history that is, I think, certainly explains a lot about what it's like to deal with Meghan and Harry.
Right, reality distorting. I mean, that's a really interesting idea. It's like there's a reality distortion field around them, and people are just like, I can't be dealing with it. And if there's not a massive payday there, why do I want to
Mhm.
be involved?
Absolutely. It's the exact same logic that says everything was so great. We've sold out over, 8,000 metric tons of jam. But because everything is so wonderful, Netflix is pulling their money out. Sure. Show me the quantum physics that leads you to that.
Oh dear. Yes, and well, but then there is one very interesting development, and I believe Matt has some really fascinating inside information on this. Samuel Johnson described a second marriage as the triumph of hope over experience. Well, Netflix appears to have gone for the triumph of hope over experience with Polo 2 from Harry,
Mm,
because Polo 1 was an unmitigated disaster, really, on
exactly.
ratings, wasn't it?
The show on
And
everyone's
now
lips, Polo.
the show on everyone's lip. Now they've gone for Polo 2. But you say it's a bit more complicated than it first seems.
It is, and I was thrilled to have the opportunity to come and talk to you, Tom, because I think that what I can illustrate for you here is what you mentioned earlier, which is urgent brand maintenance that we're seeing happening here. Pushback aside, variety, we believe in journalism, and journalism is representing all sides of the story, but sticking true and believing our incredibly well placed sources on this story. But let's take Polo for an example. In the days following the publication of my original report, it's announced that Netflix is in development with a show with Meghan and Harry and two very prolific producers, Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage, responsible for the Gossip Girl reboot, as well as a new writer. Um, this was announced, and obviously, as a response to our reporting that the temperature for the couple has changed inside the building. No one cares to work with them anymore, and they really don't have any ideas outside of their own personal story. I can tell you, per two sources, that this concept, a scripted drama around of two warring polo dynasties set in Florida, was first floated in late 2023 after Archwell Productions had a creative change and a notable Hollywood executive named Ben Browning left the company as head of scripted and unscripted projects. a new wave of creatives came in, and this was one of their first ideas. They even engaged Josh Schwartz at the time to talk about potentially coming on as a producer showrunner. Now, what's fascinating to me is that almost 3 years after that idea and that package floated inside the Archwell offices at Netflix, the offices that Netflix pay for, suddenly there's such a fever around the Polo drama that they absolutely could not resist Netflix but to pick this title up for development. Another thing I'd like to point out, all three parties creatively, that's Meghan and Harry, Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage, and this writer, Francisca Hu, are all represented by WME, which was the agency that Meghan signed with in 2023, as I reported, to bolster her profile and find creatives that would actually work with them. Because on their own, or with Netflix's assistance, they can't seem to find any top-line creatives that want to invest in them or do projects together. So I would ask everyone to look at the convenience of timing here. A 3-year-old concept that suddenly gets a new writer and is announced in development at Netflix days after a damning report about a fraught relationship with Meghan and Harry and the streamer. I'll allow everyone to draw their own conclusions.
Well, this is a really important point, Matt, and I'm gonna, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna draw the conclusion for you because as journalists, we have to stick our neck out, right? And we have to say stuff, and everybody, all these powerful people, just say it's not true, it's not true, it's rubbish. This person doesn't know what they're talking about, and literally, somebody on on Harry's side said to me the other day, unless you're having a conversation with Bella and Ted, you don't, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's talking rubbish. He's not clued into the high level decisions and stuff. And all we can do as journalists is sort of publish and be damned and allow ourselves to be proved right over the course of time. That, events hopefully prove us right in the long run. And that's how as journalists, you build credibility in drops and you lose it in buckets. Trust me, if you make a tiny mistake, you lose it in a bucket. And I think it's such an important point because the Polo 2 was totally portrayed by their side as this report in Variety is not true. It's not accurate. Matt Donnelly is lying. Matt Donnelly is making up his sources. And you are showing us right now, this was first floated 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago. I mean, it's really extraordinary. So, it was a fantastic bit of reporting.
My best friend has always said that desperation is the strongest perfume. And that is what this reeks up to me. I'd like to make one more point, if I could, about the Polo show. Bella Bajaria, who's the chief content officer of Netflix, and by all means, a proven, wonderful executive who's great at managing high maintenance creatives, has incredible output. Started local language productions, was championed local language productions around the world. By all means, knows exactly what she's doing. In my story, it gave me an on-the-record quote touting Meghan and Harry as ideal partners with a global-facing perspective that audiences love. If that's true, why is Netflix not the distributor of Cookie Queens, the documentary that the Sussexes came on board as executive producers only last December? Okay, so Netflix passed, forcing the couple to attend the Sundance Film Festival to drum up publicity and spark a bidding war for the project, which never materialized. In the days before my story published, about 3 days before my story published, miraculously, they found a distributor, a theatrical distributor who is a small but mighty and wonderful company called Roadside Attractions, but far, far from the reach and marketing power of a place like Netflix, which is the Sussexes creative home. So I present that to everyone again, just to really pay attention to what's happening here. So Meghan and Harry have irresistible creative that demands a full development slate, yet, 2 months before my story ran, they didn't even care to pick up the cookie duck, which would have cost them nothing. I rest my case. Sorry.
Amazing. And you see, this, of course, is the great peril that they have operating in Hollywood. That the business is, I suppose, so accessible. It's a closed shop, but to insiders, like what I love about Variety and what I love about your pieces is that you feel like you're in a bar getting the gossip, and that someone's telling you the real gossip. And then, of course, the executives have got to say on the record that everything's great and everyone's having tea and cakes at,
Yeah.
Ted's house and blah, blah, blah. But, the reality is that people are joking that he's taking the mickey out of them, going, I'm not going to take this call unless I've got two lawyers on the line. I mean, it's incredible.
Which is hilarious, by the way. But yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating as a reporter, and it's even more frustrating, I think, as a reader. To see such obfuscation or alleged obfuscation. But I think that one of the things that's probably most important for your listeners to understand is that Netflix, you could argue that Netflix's only job, really, at the end of the day, is talent relations. They're a content company. They need to be competitive. They need to have projects, series, films, docs, everything from A-list talent that's exclusive. So really, it's not shocking to me at all that Ted and Bella would go on the record and say, no, these people are great. We're their neighbors and we see them at parties, because they can't ever be perceived as talking smack about talent. It's just not the business that they're in. Now, that said, I also want to give credence to the fact that maybe Ted and Bella do like Meghan and Harry. But I think that they need to spend a little more time talking to a lot of people inside their organization who haven't had the same experience.
Right. Matt, you wrote a piece, a very different piece about Meghan, a cover story in October 2022. Um, Looking at the decline of the business since then, I mean, fundamentally, obviously, it's very easy to diagnose things in retrospect, but with the benefit of hindsight, what would have been a better way for them to have played this? I mean, producing movies and films is really hard, right? Like,
Yeah.
was that ever really going to be something that somebody with no experience of making movies was ever going to be able to do successfully? I mean, what could they have done differently?
Yeah, I have. That's a fantastic question, and I have a lot of I think a lot more grace for the two of them in this regard. That if you look at other, Harry and Meghan's, their existence and their deal with Netflix and sort of what they presented to Hollywood as a marketplace is very unique. But if you had to compare it, you could maybe compare it to the Obamas, right? You're talking about two people who came out of one of the most visible offices in the world and then have to find something to do with their time afterwards. And I think the difference might have been is that the Obamas are still globally beloved figures, but no more so in this country, where Hollywood operates and has historically for its entire lifespan. So I think that the Obamas' association with anything that they would touch, would automatically bring a certain set of values and a certain kind of Midas effect that would only be additive to anything.
So the Obamas obviously had a really magnificent deal with Netflix, but you feel that they've played it much better, do you?
Yeah, and I think that figures like the Obamas, which is what I think maybe a lot of people in Hollywood compared what the Meghan and Harry deal might look like. It was a bit of a blueprint. They've done all sorts of expansive and interesting things with their name. They're producing a Broadway show right now. They're remounting Proof, and also they've done really interesting sort of brand swerves. Like they put their production label on a sci-fi film with Julia Roberts called Leave the World Behind, which is about misinformation and the doom of technology. I think that in the beginning, Meghan and Harry really thought, and I wrote as much, had similar intentions, that they wanted to take sort of their cornerstone ideals as a couple and sort of map them out across content, which at the time I think seemed a lot more achievable than it's turned out to be. One of the things that Meghan told me in her cover story from 2022 that I wrote was that a lot of the way they see content is the way they see the world, which was, quote, through their love story. So I can imagine it'd be really, irresistible to find Meghan and Harry in a conference room at a studio and have, a rom-com writer or a big actress like a Kate Hudson come in and have the two of them sitting there and say, yeah, this is a part of our DNA. This is a part of our ethos. This is what we want to put in the world. Let's make a rom-com together. But that hasn't happened. So I think that, as you said, hindsight is 2020, but I think it was I couldn't quite tell you why it hasn't happened. But I think one of the more important things that I uncovered in my report from last week is that top talent doesn't have a huge interest in working with them.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. And obviously, there's two kind of rom-commy type things, Meet Me at the Lake and The Wedding Date or whatever, that seem to be stuck in production hell. Why do you think that top talent don't want to work with them? Is it again this thing of just the brand's toxic? You don't want to be seen with somebody who's kind of on the downward slope. It's better to be with people who are on the upward slope. Is it just the fickleness of Hollywood, or are they genuinely just not delivering?
I think it's sort of a double-edged sword, because I think on one way I could absolutely see talent not wanting the added layer of headache. These are a highly scrutinized couple that often press breaks bad around them. So it might be a curse of just like how they're covered. But then, as you see from my report, what kind of partners they are, at least for my sources, and how they work, and sort of like the process by which they want to influence and touch material might be seen as too invasive. And also, you're talking about two people who aren't really proven in this space. So if you're coming on board to partner with someone who's a massive, prolific producer of film and television, do you really want to humor opinions and feedback with people who've never really done this outside of unscripted projects about themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Matt, it's been absolutely brilliant to have you on. Thank you so much for coming on the Royalist. I was told the other day that when Meghan was doing her cooking show, somebody said to her, "What do you need for tomorrow?" And she said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll let you know in the morning. Just get me one of everything." So,
It's a bit of choice paralysis. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
thanks, Matt. Well, I hope that you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did. What was your favorite bit? What did you think of my fancy new background? Let me know in the comments below. Special thanks to my incredible guests, Plum, Paula, and the amazing Matt Donnelly. And a massive thank you to our producer, Rachel Passer. Well, Plum, Paula, and I are all on Substack, which is a subscription newsletter service. If you're Substack curious, just scan the QR codes provided on screen, or if you're in the car, ask your personal digital assistant to look up The Royalist on Substack, and you'll find me there. Please, please like and subscribe the show, however you're watching it. Please leave a review. It all helps keep the gas lamps flickering here at Royalist Towers. Oh, and a royal joke to finish. What do you call a French king wearing sandals? Philippe the First.